The doors of the courtroom slammed shut, and for a moment, the only sound was a pounding of hearts trapped in that tense chamber. The air was so heavy it felt like even the walls were suffocating under the weight of what was about to unfold. Reporters gripped their cameras tighter, flashes ready. Lawyers leaned toward each other, whispering in nervous fragments. And in the center of it all sat Sean Diddy Combs, hands clenched so tight the color had drained from his knuckles. His gaze was locked on the judge, unflinching, his body frozen as if even a single twitch might alter destiny itself. Then it came, the dreaded sound of papers shuffling. The judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses with slow precision, scanning the sentencing order line by line. Each flick of a page echoed louder than thunder, slicing through the silence. Her eyes, cold and deliberate, pierced into the room, leaving a chill behind every glance. The gallery leaned closer, breast-trapped, waiting for the words that could erase everything. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was history, unraveling in real time, every second burning itself into memory. Before we dive deeper into this intense moment, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you will never miss the stories we bring to light. Now, back to the chaos waiting to unfold. Diddy shifted ever so slightly, and the clink of his chains rang out like a gunshot in the silence. Heads snapped in his direction instantly. His attorneys sat rigid, exchanging nervous glances they dared not speak aloud. One tapped his pen against a notepad, the uneven rhythm sounding like a ticking bomb counting down to its final second. Across the aisle, prosecutors sat calm, almost smug, their faces carrying the quiet confidence of those who already knew what was coming. From the back of the courtroom, a journalist's whisper cracked through the silence. "This is it. This is where his empire ends." The murmur caught fire, spreading across the rows until even the jurors shifted in unease. Every eye locked on Diddy, a man once untouchable, once celebrated in clubs, charts, and boardrooms, now cornered in silence. His downfall was no longer speculation. It was unfolding in front of them. The judge inhaled deeply, her lips parting as the entire room leaned forward. But no words came. She stared at Diddy with an expression unreadable, mechanical, and cold. Outside, chant from the crowd seeped faintly through the courthouse walls, demanding justice, demanding answers. Inside, silence pressed down like a storm second before breaking. Every breath was held, every second dragging. No one realized yet, but what was about to be spoken wouldn't just be a verdict. It would set the entire courtroom ablaze, breaking open chaos like nothing they'd seen before. The tension had transformed into a living thing, thick and unrelenting. Every person leaned forward, eyes fixed on the bench. Diddy sat in his orange jumpsuit, the harsh light making him appear smaller than he had ever seen before. For a man who once commanded entire arenas, his silence now screamed louder than any performance. His fingers twitched, tapping an anxious rhythm against the table. His lawyers bent close, whispering words meant to soothe, but his focus never shifted from the judge. On the other side, prosecutors were composed, papers neatly stacked, expressions of victory barely restrained. They weren't just waiting for the gavel. They were savoring the moment, confident that history was about to record Diddy's fall. The stage was set, and the silence before the storm grew unbearable. They had all been waiting for this moment, and now it was close enough to taste. The audience buzzed with whispers that only grew louder despite the bailiff's sharp warnings. "Is it the maximum?" one reporter muttered, her voice shaking with anticipation. "I heard it's worse than anyone expected," another replied. The words rippled through the room like electricity, an undercurrent of panic mixed with morbid excitement. Even the jurors shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the judge and Diddy, unable to hide their own unease. Then, without warning, the judge raised her hand. Silence crashed down instantly. You could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, the creak of the benches, even the muffled chants of protesters outside. Inside, however, the air grew heavy, tighter, as if the entire room were being crushed by an invisible weight. Diddy's breathing changed, shallow, uneven, and a bead of sweat traced down his temple, glinting in the press cameras. To his right, a member of his team clutched a rosary, lips moving in frantic, silent prayer. Behind him, his family sat frozen, pale and terrified, watching the inevitable unfold. And then the judge spoke. Her voice was sharp, deliberate, slicing through the silence like a blade through glass. This court has reviewed the evidence, heard every argument, weighed every testimony, she began, pausing just long enough for her words to land like stones in the gut. Diddy's jaw tightened, his head dipping as though bracing for impact. You've had power, privilege, and opportunity, she continued coldly. But today, none of that shields you. Today, the law decides. The gallery gasped softly, a ripple of shock spreading through the packed room. Each word that followed fell like a hammer against stone, heavy and unrelenting. Diddy sat stiff, his jaw clenched, shoulders squared, yet trembling ever so slightly, like a man caught between the life he once commanded and the future he could not escape. Sean Combs, the judge said firmly, her eyes locking onto him like a predator staring down its prey. This court has considered your actions, the harm caused, and the laws you believe you were above. Today, you will learn no one is untouchable. For a moment, Diddy's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, to plead, but no words came. His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but Diddy didn't respond. His breathing quickened, his cuffed hands gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles went bone white. Across the aisle, the prosecutors exchanged knowing glances. One leaned back, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The other shuffled papers with slow, deliberate movements, savoring every second. They had built this moment brick by brick, and now they were watching his empire collapse in real time. Then came the number. The sentencing was brutal, merciless. It wasn't leniency, it wasn't compromise. It was the maximum. The words detonated in the courtroom like a thunderclap. For one suspended heartbeat, the entire room went still. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the cameras froze, capturing the exact instant Sean Diddy Combs' world came crashing down. And then the explosion began. Gasps ripped through the gallery. Journalists leapt to their feet, cameras flashing wildly like lightning across a stormy sky. The once muted courtroom erupted into chaos, a spectacle that would live forever in headlines, broadcasts, and history itself. The murmurs swelled, voices colliding in disbelief. Maximum sentence? Did she really say that? One gasped. Oh my God, it's over. He's finished. Reporters scrambled, thumbs flying over their phones as breaking alerts shot into world like wildfire. But the chaos wasn't confined to the gallery. Diddy's legal team cracked under the pressure. One attorney slammed a folder so hard on the table that it echoed through the chamber. Another leapt to his feet, shouting, "This is outrageous. This is not justice." The bailiffs rushed forward, stepping in between defense and bench as tension exploded. At the center of it all, Diddy didn't move. His head hung low, his eyes locked on the polished wood beneath him. His chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath sharp and ragged. The camera zoomed in, capturing the sheen of tears forming at the corners of his eyes, his hollow stare speaking louder than words ever could. This was no longer the mogul who once strutted red carpets. This was a man crumbling under the weight of his own downfall. The end wasn't whispered anymore. It was visible in his very face. The gallery erupted into pandemonium. Dozens on their feet, shouting over each other, recording, streaming the collapse in real time. The bailiffs barked orders, shoving through the frenzy, but no one listened. Not the lawyers, not the journalists, not even the spectators, their phones raised high, capturing history. The walls shook with a storm of sound, every shout bouncing off the wood like waves crashing against stone. Still, at the center of the hurricane, Sean Diddy Combs sat motionless, his head bowed, his hands cuffed tight. Suddenly, his lead attorney's palm slammed against the table, the crack cutting through the noise like a gunshot. "This is unconstitutional," he roared, his voice breaking with fury. "You cannot hand down a maximum sentence like this without bias." His trembling hand pointed at the prosecutors, his face flushed red. "This is a setup, and you know it." But across the aisle, the prosecutor barely blinked. He leaned back, arms folded, watching the eruption with that same faint smirk, a man who knew he had already won. Another of Diddy's lawyers surged forward, his voice echoing across the chamber. "We're filing an immediate appeal. You cannot destroy a man's life on manipulated narratives and media witch hunts." His words hit the crowd like sparks to gasoline. The gallery exploded once more, some shouting in support, others condemning every word. Reporters hunched forward, typing furiously, headlines flooding out in real time. For the defense, it was desperation. For the public, it was spectacle. For Diddy, it was a death sentence in slow motion. Through it all, the judge did not flinch. She sat frozen at the bench, her expression unreadable, her gavel balanced in her hand. The fury, the shouting, the accusations, all of it washed over her like waves against stone. Her silence was deafening, her stillness almost terrifying. Finally, she raised the gavel and slammed it down with a thunderous crack. "Order," she barked, her voice booming over the chaos. "This courtroom will maintain order." But there was no containing it now. The fire had already been lit. Diddy's family broke. His mother clutched a handkerchief, sobbing uncontrollably, while his sister's cries echoed through the chamber. One of his closest friends in the gallery shouted his name, trying to push past the bailiffs before being yanked back. The chaos spread like wildfire, swallowing every corner of the courtroom. And then, for the first time since the sentence was read, Diddy moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his head. His expression was unreadable, ice cold. His lips parted like he might speak, but instead, he turned toward his attorneys. The cameras caught the faintest whisper, "Do it." His lead attorney nodded, then stood tall, his voice booming above the noise. "Your Honor, this court has made a mockery of justice. If this is how you want to play it, then we'll expose every single thing you're trying to hide." The room froze. The words weren't just defiance, they were a threat. Journalists snapped to attention, leaning forward as if trying to catch history mid-sentence. Outside, anchors interrupted live broadcasts. Hashtags exploded across social media. Millions of eyes locked on the feed. The storm wasn't dying down, it was detonating. For half a heartbeat, silence reigned, a silence heavy enough to suffocate. No one believed the attorney was bluffing. His tone carried too much venom, too much danger, like a fuse being lit in plain sight. Every camera lens zoomed in tighter, searching for cracks, on the judge's face, on the prosecutor's, on Diddy himself. The defense lawyer pressed both hands on the table, leaning forward, his words cutting sharp as steel. If this court thinks it can bury the truth under headlines and pressure, think again. We've seen the emails, the communications, the deals made behind closed doors. You want this fight? You've got it. Gasps rippled through the gallery, louder this time, like a wave crashing across the room. A reporter's pen clattered to the floor. Even the prosecutor, smug since the first day of trial, shifted uncomfortably for the first time. The judge's face remained stone, but the tightening of her jaw betrayed her mask. She lifted her gavel slightly, hesitated, then set it back down, the air turned suffocating. These weren't empty threats. They were bombs waiting to be dropped. And then Diddy stirred again. He lifted his head fully, his eyes burning cold with something new. Not fear, not hope, but defiance sharpened into a weapon. He leaned toward his team and whispered, "It's time." His attorney didn't hesitate. With a thunderous slam, he dropped a thick folder onto the defense table, papers scattering across the wood, photographs sliding dangerously close to the edge. He grabbed one sheet, raising it high for all to see. "This," he shouted, his voice echoing against the walls, "is just the beginning. You want to play this game." He paused, his eyes locking on the judge. "Then let's play. We'll make every deal, every secret, every hidden file public. You don't own this courtroom, you've just been exposed by it." The gallery erupted. Spectators leapt to their feet, some shouting in disbelief, others recording every second on their phones. Reporters bolted for the doors, desperate to break the story first, while outside, the crowd pressed against barricades, unaware of how far the chaos had already spiraled inside. The judge slammed her gavel 3 times, shouting for order, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Bailiffs surged forward, struggling to hold back the frenzy. Behind the defense table, Diddy's family was unraveling, his mother clutching her chest in prayer, his children wide-eyed with fear, his friends calling out his name. One voice cut through, "Tell them the truth. Diddy, tell them everything." Cameras caught it, microphones broadcast it, and within seconds it was trending worldwide. Diddy leaned back in his chair, chains rattling, the faint curl of a smirk on his lips, not joy, not victory, but something darker. A silent promise that this wasn't the end. This sentencing wasn't closing a chapter. It was cracking open a much bigger story, one that could ripple far beyond him. His attorney seized a moment, stepping forward with thunder in his voice. "We have evidence the sentencing is tainted. Deals were made behind closed doors, deals that never should have happened." He slammed a thick stack of papers onto the table, scattering documents and photographs across the polished wood. "These are communications, emails, signed statements, proof that this jury was never allowed to hear the full truth." Gasps shot through the gallery. Camera shutters fired like gunshots. Reporters screamed questions. What kind of deals? Who's involved? As the courtroom swelled with uncontrollable energy, the prosecutor shot to his feet, slamming his palms down. "This is outrageous. These so-called documents are inadmissible. This is nothing but theatrics." But Diddy's lawyer roared back, finger pointed across the aisle. "Theatrics? What's outrageous is a court pretending to be impartial while cutting deals under the table." The words detonated like a bomb. The judge pounded her gavel, voice breaking as she demanded order, but it was useless. Then, finally, Diddy leaned forward, his cuffed hands gripping the table. His pale face was steady, his voice low but carrying like a blade through the madness. "You want the truth?" He glanced at the gallery, then locked eyes with the judge. "Then let's give them the truth." His lawyer nodded, pulling a sealed envelope from his briefcase and holding it high. "Inside this," he declared, "are records, transfers, names, dates, everything. If this court won't hear it today, then the world will." The gallery erupted into a frenzy. Spectators climbing benches, journalists live-tweeting every word, the chant from outside bleeding into the chamber. The courtroom wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It had become a battlefield. This isn't just a celebrity scandal anymore. It's a full-blown federal crisis. Inside the courthouse, the judge's face turned red with fury as he slammed the gavel so hard the wood cracked. "Lock down the entire city," he thundered at the marshals. "I want Sean Combs in custody by midnight." But outside, New York belonged to the people. Protesters stormed barricades, their chants echoing louder than the sirens. "Free Diddy! Free Diddy!" For a moment, his escape didn't look like desperation. It looked like a revolution. Back in the SUV, silence filled the air until the driver finally broke it. "Listen carefully. You're not safe here. They'll come after you harder than ever." This was only the beginning. Diddy stared out the tinted window, the city's skyline dissolving under flashing lights, helicopters circling like vultures. His breath slowed, focus sharpening. "What's the plan?" he asked. The driver, a scar running down his cheek, answered with a chilling calm. "First, we get you out of New York. Second," he paused, his words heavy with menace, "we expose a deal they never wanted the world to know." Diddy's eyes narrowed. "What deal?" But before an answer came, the driver's glance shifted to the rearview mirror. Two unmarked SUVs had just locked onto their trail. "They're here," he muttered, flooring the gas. The highway erupted in chaos, sirens wailing, helicopters closing in, engines roaring like predators. Diddy gripped the seat belt, tension gripping every muscle, as one truth settled in like ice. This wasn't freedom. This was war. And as the SUV vanished into the night, the nation held its breath, knowing that Sean Diddy Combs' case had just crossed a line it could never return from. Tonight, everything changed. The camera locked in, catching every twitch of his face. Panic, dread, the unspoken truth that what just dropped wasn't theater. It was real. The courtroom detonated, screams colliding with gasps, chaos spreading like wildfire. This wasn't a sentencing anymore. It was a revelation so big it threatened to rip the entire system apart. For the first time since this trial began, the power flipped. Diddy wasn't just fighting for freedom. He had triggered something that no judge, no prosecutor, no courtroom walls could contain. And in that instant, one truth was undeniable. The verdict wasn't the story anymore. The secrets were. Outside, the streets shook with energy. Crowds pressed against barricades, chanting, waving signs, voices rising in thunderous waves. Satellite trucks lined every curb, reporters scrambling, anchors breathlessly shouting into cameras. Breaking now, allegations of a secret deal between the judge and prosecution. Helicopters carved circles above, their blades drowning in the roar of a nation glued to its screens. Inside, the storm hit its peak. Bailiffs shouted orders, swallowed by a tidal wave of spectators, reporters, and camera flashes. Questions hurled like bullets. Was there a cover-up? Did the judge cut a deal? The gallery was pure panic. And there sat Diddy, chained at the wrists, yet somehow untouchable. He leaned back, tilting his head toward the ceiling, inhaling slow like a man who knew the balance of power had just tipped. His expression wasn't relief. It was colder, sharper, the face of someone who had chosen not to go quietly. Beside him, his attorney lifted a second envelope high, his voice cutting through the storm. This isn't just about my client. This is about justice. Every single person in this room deserves to know what's been buried. Gasps tore through the gallery again. The prosecutor froze, his skin ashen, jaw locked, whispering furiously to co-counsel. But his eyes betrayed the truth. He knew it was already too late. The damage was irreversible. And then, boom. The judge slammed her gavel so hard it would split, her voice cracking under the weight of it all. The judge's words, "This court is in recess," fell flat against the chaos. The noise didn't stop. Reporters rushed for the doors, photographers shoved each other, and chants outside the courthouse grew louder by the second. Hashtags exploded across every platform. #Diddy trial, #courtroom chaos, #secret deal exposed. The world was watching in real time as history unraveled. Inside, Diddy's family wept, his mother clutching his daughter tightly, whispering prayers no one could hear. Friends and critics clashed in heated arguments, while bailiffs barked orders, shoving people back in a desperate attempt to restore order. But the energy was too wild, too raw to contain. Through it all, Diddy stood firm. He didn't flinch. Slowly, he turned toward the cameras, his stare unreadable yet heavy with meaning. A promise, a warning, and a declaration all at once. This isn't over. Marshals led him out as a crowd outside erupted, barricades shaking under the weight of protesters and supporters. Reporters swarmed, microphones shoved forward, camera flashes exploding across his face, capturing the moment that would dominate every front page and trending feed. Some chanted his name, others demanded justice, but no one was silent. By the time the armored van's doors slammed shut, the courthouse steps had turned into a battlefield of theories, outrage, and accusations. Headlines spread instantly. Diddy's sentencing erupts into chaos after secret deal allegations. Judge under fire as explosive evidence shakes trial. Is Diddy the victim or the catalyst? Inside the van, Diddy closed his eyes for a moment, calm and controlled despite the storm outside. This wasn't the end. Not for him. Not for the judge. Not for anyone tangled in the web. The verdict had been given, but the real battle was only beginning. Behind the flashing lights and screaming headlines, a deeper storm was brewing, one that threatened to expose everyone, no matter how untouchable they thought they were. And as the van disappeared into the distance, one truth remained. Diddy might have lost this round, but the war had only just begun.